Okay, it's another Friday night, and I'm here to taste another whiskey, or a few more whiskeys, the way it looks. Things are just going that way, where I do 3 or 4 in a row, and then put them up as time goes on, and that seems to be spreading them nicely. Tonight I have something here from Glenfiddich. You could probably already guess by the triangular clan view of the box. This is the IPA. This is their series. It started with this one, the IPA, but I haven't done it yet. The next one was the XX, or for 20 different barrels that they used to make this particular single malt. And then there was the Winter Storm, which was the third one. And then there was, I think, Fire and Cane, which I have one, but it's going to be a while till I open it. And I didn't buy the Winter Storm because it was like $250 or something like that, and I wasn't going to spend that much. Things may change in the future, I don't know. But those two last ones, the Winter Storm, I tried it. That was the first dram I had at the 2018 Victoria Whiskey Festival. And the Whiskey Festival is coming up real soon too, so I'm really looking forward to that. Let's open this up, pour a dram, and then I'll see what it has to say on the back here. It looks like gold lettering. Oh no, it's black lettering, which is okay. That's visible. If I use the magnifying glass and a bright light, maybe I'll be okay. Alright, this looks the same as the bottle for the XX, the same shape. But this is the one that came out first. It's just that I taste them more or less in chronological order when I acquired them, shall we say. Because that way I don't have to guess which one to have next. But I do move things around a little bit. I usually start with a lower ABV and move my way up, which I'm going to do tonight as well. Oh, tight. There, nice. Nice little pop. Let's just pour us a wee dram here. Okay, my drams are not so wee, but who's counting? I already I'm smelling something. Smells like beer already. Now, when it comes to beers, my preferred beers are usually lagers and ales. I like ales, but not necessarily IPAs, which are India Pale Ales. The reason they call them India Pale Ales is because they've had a lot of hops added to them so that they could make the trip in a ship all the way around Africa to get to India from the UK. That's why they called it India Pale Ale, I believe. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me. Let's see now. We got our Whiskey Scout glass here. Yeah, Whiskey Scout glass. And this is bottled, I believe, at 43% alcohol by volume. And it says 43%, 750 mils. Now that we've got this started, I'm going to see what it says on this. Oh, there's something in here too. There was something shoved in at the bottom. Oh, it's one of these. I have another one here. It's a booklet with Glenfiddich stuff on it. It opens up. And what does it say? Oh, experiment. Experiment. And they have on there the XX and the IPA. And where will the experimental series go next? Question mark. Well, that was the Winter Storm, and then there's the Fire and Cane. So this is a couple of years old, I think. It's cool. 20 Mines Unexpected Whiskey. Okay, that was the XX. And here it says experimental series, step into uncharted territory, cask finish IPA. To pioneer a new malt whiskey, we created a new craft beer. Okay, for this experiment, Brian Kinsman, our malt master, wanted to season traditional whiskey casks in an unusual way. Collaborating with the Speyside craft brewer, he created a big, bold, and zesty IPA beer that would imbue our oak with extra hoppy notes. Not only did they pioneer a new craft beer, they created the first single malt Scotch whisky finished in India Pale Ale casks. Number 01 IPA experiment, and it says nose and taste, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna see what they say. I'm gonna do it myself and tell you what I get. It probably says much the same here. Oh, a bunch of writing. You know what do we got? Okay, Glenfiddich experimental series pushes whiskey boundaries and challenges traditions. When Brian Kinsman, our malt master, met an entrepreneurial Speyside craft brewer, they hit it off immediately and didn't take long for a genuine idea to form. Experimental and untraditional. Brian suggested creating a Glenfiddich whiskey finished in IPA craft beer casks, something never done in the industry before. I'm surprised that the Scotch Whisky Society didn't get on their ass for that. But what started as a quirky idea had turned into an intensive experiment. Not only did they create a pioneering new whiskey with unique zesty citrus notes and settle into fresh hops, but they also created a pioneering new craft beer in the process. The malting is proof that great things happen when great minds meet. Experiment over ice with a twist of blood orange. Why? If I have to add something to it, that means it doesn't taste good. Well, we'll see. No twist of mint or lime. I'm going to start with neat. I'm getting a hoppy note right away. It's got that slightly bitter, kind of herbal, floral thing going on. Yeah. It's a little bit like if you've ever made beer from a kit. I used to make beer from a kit way back over 30 years ago. That makes me sound old, doesn't it? And this smells just like, I had this great big pot. It was a big aluminum pot that I would put on the top of the stove, and I'd get a rolling boil. I'd have syrup, malt in the form of syrup. It was like molasses. You just pour it like molasses into the bottom, and you'd add water, and then you'd stir in the hops when you were brewing a batch. And it's got some legs. Might be surprisingly viscous for a 43% alcohol by volume whiskey. I'll take a sip of water first. Nice. So it smells to me a lot like what my beer brewing pot would smell like when it was boiling. Quite malty. and somewhat hoppy. I hope it's not too bitter in the flavor. Somewhere underneath there, there's probably some of that fruity Glenfiddich kind of thing wanting to come out. It's not unpleasant. It's quite nice. And of course, I used to be a beer lover before I had to stop drinking beer because of my diabetes, but let's give it a taste. That is rather nice. But that was just the first sip. Okay. I think I know how to approach this one now. I'm going to take my time with it a little longer. There is no age statement, so it could be a pretty young Glenfiddich. What else does it say on the bottle? Experimental Series Number 1, 43%, IPA India Pale Ale Cask Finish, and a bunch of stuff on the back, which is probably tasting notes or something. It definitely has a malty and hoppy kind of thing. It smells like a beer. Was there another whiskey that smelled like beer that I tried recently? Oh, the Weiser's Hopped. Yeah. Okay. What I'm getting is something that tastes like fruits, things like apples and pears, but with that have been, how do you describe that? Like fruits and malt. So it's got a malty thing to it. It's got a fruity thing to it. I can't distinguish what the fruits are, but they're lighter fruits like pears and apples and things like that. I can't say that I can pick out the fruits, but covering that is the bitterness from the hops. It's definitely different. Yeah. It has a rather bitter finish, like you would expect from hops. So first, what hits me is hops. Some malt and strong hops. And there's fruit. There's fruit hiding underneath the hops. The strongest thing is hops. Then comes some malt. Then comes some fruit after that. So the fruitiness is definitely coming from the spirit, from the Glenfiddich spirit. But it's not spirit driven at all. This is cask driven, and it's mostly hops. Maybe I can coax some of the fruits out of it. Seeing what a couple of drops of water will do. Couple drops of water. Now, I can see this as maybe a stepping stone for beer drinkers wanting to get into whiskey, and they're not really into whiskey so much. But when you got a whiskey that tastes a little bit more like beer than whiskey usually does, maybe it's you could envision it as a transition from one to the other for some people. For some people who don't want to stray away from familiar flavors, especially if they're beer drinkers and they like craft beers and IPAs. You know, a couple drops of water have released some caramel on the nose. I'm getting some caramel. But there's always that hoppy aroma to it. Even though there's more caramel, or a lot more, there was no caramel before. Now there's quite a bit of caramel. With just 2 drops of water. Quite a bit of caramel. Maybe some vanilla hiding under there as well. Yeah, a little bit. So I'm guessing that the casks were new make, just virgin oak and with beer aged in them, or were they ex-bourbon and then they had beer aged in them and then they had this aged in it? I'm not sure. I might have to read the fine print. But with a couple of drops of water, this is getting nice. This is getting a lot more caramel, some vanilla, and there's the hops just hanging on the edge. The bitterness from the hops. It's interesting. It doesn't seem to be as malty as it was before I added the water. Let's see what it tastes like now. Well, that's changed a lot. The 2 drops of water have taken a lot of the viscosity out of it. It's not as thick as it was before. Initially, I'm tasting some caramel, toffee, that kind of thing. But then there's that finish of bitterness. having been a beer drinker for many years before I got into whiskey more seriously, I can appreciate the bitterness. But the bitterness is kind of overpowering. It's stronger than the toffee that I get initially, the toffee and caramel that I get initially. And I'm not getting much in the way of fruits at all now. There was a little bit of indistinct fruits before that I couldn't really pinpoint because they were covered up by the hoppiness. Here I'm getting again a bit of caramel, vanilla. More vanilla now as it goes along. Less toffee, less caramel. More vanilla. And that maltiness and hoppiness is still there on the nose. I like the smell of hops. I really enjoy it. What I have maybe learned to dislike is the bitterness, which I used to love. Well, I used to like bitterness in a beer, but I didn't like it to be too bitter. IPA, and it was never my style of beer. I was more of a lager drinker or a Scottish ale style beer, or a brown ale, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, that bitterness is a bit off-putting to me. Maybe it wouldn't have been when I was drinking beer all the time, but now it's a bit off-putting. It'd be interesting to see what happens to this as it oxidizes. Maybe the bitterness will be mellowed with oxidation. We'll see. Anyway, Slanchua.
Foodquig.
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 Yeah.
I don't imagine that anyone would ever accuse me of being hasty. But in my haste, I forgot to tell you how much this cost. $90.09. That was the price. Oh, with the bottle deposit. So $89.99 plus the bottle deposit, $90.09. $4.50 goods and services tax, and $9 of liquor tax. Grand total $103.59. Was it worth it? I don't think so. I think I could get things that are a lot better for the same money. But it remains to be seen what will happen to the bottle as it oxidizes. Maybe it will get better later.